All right. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker Carl, and I'm coming to you from beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm here with my friends Dan and Catherine, and today we're going to continue our discussion of the book Leonardo and Gabriel by Tim Tigner. And this has definitely been an interesting book and has sparked some very deep conversation over the past, few months now. And but before we get going, first of all, we're going to be talking about the chapter entitled "Conclusion." And but before we get going with that, let's go ahead and jump out, introduce yourselves, guys, and then we can get going on this combo.
Good morning. This is Catherine Clement in Shawnee, Oklahoma.
Dan Sisik in Las Vegas, Nevada, and looking forward to continuing the conversation and see how deep we go today.
Yeah, I think before we got on here, we were sitting here trying to decide what we had talked about last. And of course, if you're watching this video in series with the other videos, you'll know exactly what we were just talking about. But for us, it's been a couple of weeks. So um, just going to kind of go back through the very end of the last chapter to kind of, I don't know, we were talking about time. I know that. And in the last chapter or two, Leonardo and Gabriel have been discussing time as God or God as time and their thoughts and processes along that conclusion. And so the end of the last one, they were going through the different actions. I think is that what it was? The actions, yeah, the actions of God. And oh no, abilities. Abilities was the last part of what are God's abilities, and one of the last abilities they discussed was omniscience, and suggesting that omniscience being also a characteristic of time. Good morning, Karen. There's witness to everything. No witness, not witness in the sense of a big brain with eyeballs on events, but witness in the sense that everything is intertwined with time. In fact, time is defined as a defining characteristic of every event. And then also saying no place is untouched by time. Let's see, and the short answer. Oh, okay. So the biggest thing with that was that is just kind of separating ourselves from the idea of God being the wizened old man with a wand, and then kind of switching over to this idea of that God is time. And so I know we've been discussing that off and on for the past couple of weeks. And does anybody have any thoughts on that aspect? Because I can't remember if we discussed the omniscience of God's omniscience versus time.
Well, I think as I'm looking through the chapter, I think a little bit more is coming back to me now that the fog's kind of clearing out of my brain too from how I woke up this morning. I think we did get a little bit more into uh, conclusion because I think we even talked about um, is time worthy of worship? And I think I remember us talking a little bit about that, about worship and with God and things like that and stuff like that. So now is my brain starting to. I think we did get some into this chapter and stuff like that, and so we might be recovering it, but maybe we'll draw out some other things now that we've had some time to think about it or let it sit in our brains too. So I mean, I don't see that it hurts to kind of go back through it and maybe we see what else we come out, and if we feel we've got enough, then we can jump to even the next chapter, maybe.
Sounds good, Dan. Yeah, because they were talking. Of course, they'd come up with a list, and the list was characteristics and abilities, and let's see, what was the other one? Actions. And so then now we're talking about characteristics for this chapter, and benevolent being the first characteristic of of God. Does that match up with time? Is time benevolent? Is and then they're saying. So they're just kind of like working through that conversation of conventional wisdom. Wisdom directly addresses it with time heals all wounds, but clearly time's benevolence goes much deeper than that. And then thinking of time as a force in life, and the defining characteristic of life. Okay, so then if we talk about eternal, okay, so the other characteristics are eternal and worthy of worship. Is time eternal? And, I mean, I would think so, but how can we know? Because we're not eternal. I mean, we're only here for a short little blip of time. I think part of our whole thing on the hang up on time is that I feel like time, the defining thing of time is that, we as humans have decided that this movement through the universe is considered time. So then, I don't know. I don't know if that would necessarily mean that God is time, because couldn't the universe exist without us measuring it? I don't know. I think.
Yes, it could.
I think that's part of the whole issue there, right there, because I think in my mind's eye, because we don't know when exactly started, if it ever started, or if it's always been there until we came into existence. However, we came into, I believe, my beliefs, but however we came into existence, and and we did talk about where the fact that we use time as the all-encompassing aspect and measurement of how our lives move, because without our memories or anything like that, and having the memories to be able to understand that, just this last place in the movement through, and I'm trying not to say time, but the movement through the energy or force of getting to that next step, is because we have the memories and we remember that just that last period ago, this was where I was at, but now I'm here. And so we have to have a way of somehow measuring that change, and so therefore we constructed around time. And there seem to be some things that do happen on a regular basis, so it seems, such as the Earth rotating, the planets and this stuff going around the sun, and you know but they also say that while we're doing that, we're also falling through the universe. So as is expanding, we're moving within that expansion of the universe, and so therefore it seems like there's a constant motion going on all the time.
I was I was reading an article last night wherein the man who wrote the article was kind of addressing the idea, does God keep learning? And he said, God knows everything, knows all there is to know. How could he exist? I'm just making up the number at this point, but 25,555,000, I mean, million, whatever years, and not know everything. And I realized that I had never thought in terms of years or time as a concept of what we think about it, that God has existed. And there's something about that that made me a little bit more, I don't know, it brought me back to our study with this and how I'm trying to grapple with the idea of God being time. That's a whole different thing than how old God might be. I still don't have a clear idea of how to separate that. That does bring up to mind another thought that I had. I knew someone a number of years ago who believed that he was in contact. He didn't know who he was in contact with, but he called him Father, which said to me that he believed he was in contact with God, and he could tell people certain things about their lives because of that. And one day I said something to him, and he said, well, I haven't been able to get any information over the last couple of days, and I think it's because of, I don't know what was going on at the time, a volcano and the, in on the other side of the equator, and just lots of people requiring lots of attention and that sort of thing. And I thought, well, that's interesting. That doesn't sound very omniscient to me. The more I look at this and read this and then read other things, just it seems to me by happenstance that have something to do with this, the more actually mind-boggled I feel like I get. I don't feel like I get really very clear about it.
I think that's a good point, that the more that we dig into this, the more that it just brings up more questions. um, so time being eternal, I think that, maybe that's just a matter of our perspective. It seems like it, because, time has been going on as far as we know before we came along, and it'll keep on going long after we're going on. But will we be here to observe it is a whole nother question. Um, the next part as it goes into, is time worthy of worship? And I don't know, Leonardo seems to think so. He seems to think that people worship time, when he's talking about, anytime somebody is turning 50, and how, elders always say every minute is a gift. And then he was talking about how he thinks are, youth or even participate in their own way. They may not realize it, but they feel so vibrant and free. But adults know it comes from an intuitive understanding that they have plenty of time, which I don't think that's necessarily true. That's his opinion, of course, but I just think children are more exuberant because they're younger and they're brand new. They have more energy, whereas the rest of us who've been here for a while, we're kind of weighed down by the gravity of everything. Um, that brings up another aspect of it. I was watching a science video not too long ago. I think I may have mentioned it on the last one, and it was talking about I don't know, just the whole universe, and it touched on time. But one of the things that one of the hosts or the actors on the show mentioned was a movie called Interstellar. Have you guys seen that movie? It's been a while. It came out, I don't know, a few years back. I just watched it again just to refresh my mind on it, and it is like a complete mind bending movie when it comes to time, because the main character um, goes into space and travels across our universe and is trying to get to one of these possible habitable planets that's light years away from us. So he kind of goes into a deep sleep, and then he gets there. And then when he's there, they're really close to a black hole, which is like sucking all the light and energy and everything into it. And the way that they're talking about gravity is gravity having an effect on time, and how it slows time down. And so then in this movie, he goes down to this planet that is inside, just just outside the event horizon of the black hole. And while he's down there, he experiences like 10 minutes. But then when he gets back up to the spaceship, they've experienced multiple years. And um, and that is just kind of like this really mind-boggling thing. And of course, they're talking about Einstein's theory of relativity, and they're talking about gravity and time and all of these things. And I completely don't understand any of it or how that even makes any sense. But yet, then in this science video, where I remember more of what it was now I've been talking about for a moment. They were this one particular scientist. His whole scientific study is on time and atomic. He's like at wherever they have the atomic clock, and they are continually discovering deeper and deeper increments of time to like the point, I don't know, 10 decimal points out or 15 or however many it is. And he's like, as an average person, when you're looking at your watch and the little hands going around and around, if you're standing here at sea level, and then there's someone else up on top of a mountain, you're not going to see much of a difference. But when you're looking at it in a decimal point, way out in the decimal points, he's like, the closer to the Earth you are, the slower that the time moves, and the further away from the core of the Earth you are, faster time moves. And and so he's talking about how gravity actually affects time. And so then that brought me, of course, back to our whole conversation of time and whether time is actually the thing we should be talking about. Maybe we should be talking about gravity, because without gravity, nothing can exist either. And if time is affected by gravity, that is just like a whole nother mind-boggling aspect of all of this. But anyway, I wanted to bring that up just because, Catherine, you were talking about mind-bending information. So anyway,
Well, I'll throw this little tidbit out because of when you were bringing that up about gravity, and in and I'm gonna say the two of them kind of go hand in hand, with time being, so, but gravity is what makes it feasible for us because of what atmosphere we have to live in and stuff, and we live on the planet. And I think that's part of how we are able to exist, so therefore we can be in that energy of time to be able to experience, because of our memories and our emotions and everything that we have. And So to be able to experience it, I think the gravity plays a part in us being able to, in our physical manifestation, be able to experience it. If that kind of, in my mind, it kind of makes sense to me. Because I think out there we're more in the universe. If we're in the universe, we're more in the core of the movement of the energy, whereas here we're able to experience and know that we were at this point, and here now at this point. I guess in my mind it just kind of works together. That's kind of what I'm getting to. I can't really say.
Definitely makes me want to watch more science videos and scientific things on, just fully understanding. Of course, one of the things that they were talking about in that video, because it was like six different scientists, and they were discussing their particular study of science, and they each were just sitting there going, I've been doing this for 20 years or 15 years or 18 years or however many each one of them was doing it, they all are agreeing that we've barely even scratched the surface of our understanding, and every time that we discover something new, that just opens up a whole new realm of possibility that we never even thought of before. And now we're kind of off the topic of this book, but at the same time, I think it's interesting because we we read books, and that opens up another level of our understanding of our possibilities in our own existence. And yeah, so it's definitely interesting. Um, So what do you guys think about this worthy of worship aspect of it? Do you feel like time is worthy of worship?
Last night I did check out Tim Tigner a little bit on the internet, and he's written a lot of books, and he must write them fairly rapidly because he had written uh, Leonardo and Gabriel in 2019, and he had also written a book about time in 2019. And that particular book was a science fiction book, and the two reviews I read on it, uh, the people who wrote the reviews were um, kind of on the same page in reference to that they really liked the idea that he'd come up with, and they wished another author had written the book because they thought it was a lousy book because it had gone into so many different aspects of things. Apparently, Tim Tigner's interests in life have been quite. There's been a lot of them, and he looks really, really young, but um, he he was a great Green Beret, and I realized I hadn't heard about Green Berets for a lot of years. I thought it was like a baby when I'd heard about them. I'm just kidding, of course. But it was interesting to me that this book about time didn't have anything to do about a God approach, at least from what I could tell that was written about it. And so I think I think the reason that I wanted to say something at this point is that I'm really, really glad, number one, that I read the book, but number two, that we have been doing this for some time as a group, talking about some of these things, because I can't imagine ever talking about this kind of stuff with my church group. Anybody that I had known growing up in church, or really anybody. I can think of one or two people, but it wouldn't be, this involved. And I'm just really glad to have spent the time thinking about some of the things that he has raised, in particular with someone like Leonardo.
I agree, Catherine. I was thinking about this not too long ago, like the week or so ago, um, before we got on here, and how it's really just an amazing thing that we can have these deep conversations and deep questions in relating to this topic without having to worry about one another getting all pissy about it, if you will. Because that's how I feel. It's like I can't have this kind of a conversation with some people in my life because they would be so offended by the idea that we're questioning any of it, that or that we're even thinking about any other possible ideas, that it would just be a really difficult conversation. So I'm thankful that we can do this too. Go ahead, Dan. I know you unmuted at the same time I did.
And I was gonna say, for me, I think it's only helped deepen my beliefs in some of my things, and I think it's part of our stuff in order to grow. For me, grow closer, more in touch, and more enlightened to understand how this was all created. So I can only get that much closer to the creative force, energy, God, whatever, infinite intelligence that created this. Because as we'll learn, a little bit as we go on to a little bit more in the book, that well, I'll jump into it. Leonardo felt a warm glow spreading within him because I'm jumping a little bit, but um, it talks about that's what is meant by we're all God's children created in His image. But above that, he goes in and realizes that you know after talking time worthy of worship, and then by sharing itself with us, is time not making us gods? If not as individuals and collective, are we not as species omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent? Are we leaders? And then Gabriel literally began beaming with pride. You just enjoyed your first glimpse of the entire elephant. Going back to the elephant story in the last, where it's our perspective. And I think that by it's not an insult. It's not you know changing anything. Let's better understand how the universe works and interacts and plays such a part in our lives that I think without questions we'll always be at the same state we were in, and that's not how you grow, and that's not how you learn, and that's not how you changes and work towards that and be all end all of whatever we're headed towards. And that's for me personally how I feel about this.
Well,
Sorry,
I don't think. Oh,
there's
go
a
ahead.
little bit more I realized I didn't read, but um, well, I'll jump in. Sorry, didn't. But and then uh, Gabriel spread his wings in silent awe. Leonardo's excitement erupted like Vesuvius as the conclusion cascade continued. That's so profound yet so simple. It squares the circle. Leonardo's understanding, and everything fits comfortably. Gabriel gave Leonardo a few seconds to swallow, and then said, "Very glad to hear it. Now finish." Leonardo's thought and goes back, but it just talks about how how that all fits together and works together, and for him, for it, where it helps me to kind of move forward.
It's interesting what you were talking about, that movie, Samantha, and gravity and time, because every book I've ever read or experienced, talking to people about the afterlife, it's always been said that, what is a lifetime to us down here is moments or seconds in in wherever we go. And I'm not going to claim that I know where that is. I believe it's somewhere that we go and kind of regroup and kind of look at what we've done and say, okay, I could have done better there. I could have done better there, but who knows for sure. But they do say that whoever they are, say that time, it's just a few moments. You're just gone for a few moments and then you're back. And to us, it's like this entire lifetime of challenges and growth opportunities and things like that. I do remember we were talking before we got on, we were trying to figure out where we were at, and I had said I was going to comment on something, and then none of us could remember what that was. So I did remember as we were talking that, basically what this, I don't know which chapter it's in that it says it, because I can't figure out. We need people writing books need to put chapters in them. Our mind is very kind of, it's hard to figure out where we're at without chapters. But especially when audible books and Kindle books or printed books are all different, and I can't quite figure that out. I would think an audible book would be somebody reading the written book, so that it would be the same, but it's not. Pretty much every book I've ever had on Kindle and Audible is different. So, but basically, at some point, it claims, with this, that time is God. That the reason it's so difficult for people to accept that concept is because they're hung up on the fact that God is actually personal and paying attention to what's going on and can interact with us individually. And somehow they're trying to claim that that's not necessarily reality, and it may not be, because I don't know the truth of things here in this body. But I will say that personally, because of my personal experiences, I would argue that until the end of time, if there is an end of time, only because of, well, let me just say that something in my life has communicated to me. It has told me to avoid things. It has guided me um, out of pathways where I would have been harmed. In other words, I'm driving for Lyft, and all of a sudden I hear in my head, go left, and then there's an accident right there. Like things like that, that to me I absolutely cannot question the validity of that. Now, where that information or who that information comes from, I can question all day long, because I don't know. Could be God, could be somebody sitting at a computer in another universe, plane of existence. It could be a million things that I haven't even considered yet, because my capacity to think as a human is very, as quote, open-minded as I tend to be, it's still very structured, and there's still just so many things that are in my realm of possibilities. There's so many things that could be the truth that I haven't even considered yet. So that's obviously why we read these books and we talk about what it makes us think about and different things like that. But there's absolutely some form of personal communication. I believe everybody gets that communication, whether they pick up on it or recognize it or interpret it as such, is a completely different story. But I believe everybody gets it, and where it comes from, I have no idea, truthfully. But to say that God is impersonal, to me, God is love. When I'm out of this body in spirit form, the only thing I feel is an all-encompassing love there's no way to even describe it in words to where you would fully feel it. But if you felt the most love and endearment in your heart that you've ever felt at any point in this life, you could multiply that by, a million times, and you're still not going to come close to what I feel when I'm out of body. So to me, that feeling, that love is God. And that is so completely different from time, at least in my mind, that I just can't reconcile the two.
Yeah, I agree with you, Catherine, in the aspect of I feel like time, using the term time is just way too limiting, and I think we've discussed that in the previous conversation too. Of it's just too limited of a definition, and however, I do like this where he is talking about how, us as a species collectively, are we not omniscient, omnipotent, and benevolent? Are we not creators? And suggesting that we, as well as time and existence and all of it in combination, um, are like a god, or are god like, or are God. I don't know. And I feel like, when you're talking about that whole aspect of being in communication with something, I completely am right there with you. I've had the same guidance from who knows where it comes. I don't know. But it happens. And my thought on it though is that is to realize that we are so limited in our abilities to perceive the universe, and we forget sometimes that there's stuff that we just can't even perceive. And I wonder, if we kind of looked at ourselves um, as kind of just an aspect of God, then it makes perfect sense that we should be able to communicate back and forth in some way, or that with one another as a whole and not even realize it. I mean, that's very possible too. Maybe we're getting this information back and forth between one another and just don't even realize it. I mean, I know that I can communicate with people without words and without um, you know physically trying to communicate with somebody. It just happens. And particularly people that we're around more than others. Um, so, and with animals and with plants, and I mean everything. So uh, yeah, I mean, I think there's just a whole lot more that we just don't fully understand because we're not capable of understanding it in this physical reality. How about Dan? I see you unmuting yourself.
Oh, I found the part that I really wanted to get on, and it says, you know, going back to where Leonardo felt a warm glow spreading within, he pressed forward. That's what is meant by individuals as humanity as a whole. I ears, arms, legs, memory. And that is why we are all equal. We are all quite literally at one with God. And I think that goes back to what the two of you were saying, that in that essence, when we have something speak to us, nudge us, that not in your stomach, whatever, saying, I don't want to go that direction for some odd reason. And then later on, you find out there was a bad accident or something, or you get delayed at home because somehow you misplaced your keys, but it was part of how the universe speaking to us that somehow we misplaced our keys, but it held us up so that way we wouldn't be at the accident, or we wouldn't get that speeding ticket because we're late because we're speeding or something. And I think that that's part of it. I think that's how, you know, I don't see myself as God, but I see myself as one with that whole aspect. And the more, and I think that goes back to what I was saying. I think there's nothing wrong with asking the questions, opening the dialogue, trying to draw closer and nearer to understand better how I am so connected and all, as one with, you know, God, time, the universe, gravity, the whole in and all and outs of it. That why I look at it this way. Why wouldn't you want to ask the questions? I don't want to. I want to continue to grow and learn and better understand. So my connection just gets stronger with everything. And I think that's what I think you two are getting into there a little bit.
I don't have any other thoughts on this chapter so far. It's not really. We can wrap up for today. What do you guys think? Are we done? This one?
How
I think we can.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Catherine. I think we can. I just want to say that coming to the ultimate conclusion that whether we call God time or any of our favorite names or love or whatever we can relate to, that we can benefit from and feel connected to, I think that is that is good. That is what I desire, and I think that from hearing all the rest of you, that's what each of you desire, and it just makes me feel good, and it just makes me feel the love that I feel for each of you, and I appreciate being on with this group every time that we get together. Thanks.
I love you guys too. And I appreciate being able to have these conversations with you because I can have the conversation with my husband, but that he's probably the only other person in my life that I can do that and feel like a safe conversation without it becoming an argument or butting heads over whatever. So I am very thankful for you guys. Well, if that's all for today, we can wrap up. Anybody who's out there watching, if this has been an interesting conversation for you and you'd like to join in, then of course, like this video, share it with your friends. You can find us on Facebook at mindsetmasterycollective.com. That will take you directly into our Facebook group. And with that, have an awesome, amazing week. And we'll see you next time on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.